All right, so the Texas GOP recently came out with their official 2022 party platform, and this shit is simultaneously one of the most insane documents that I've ever read in my life, and also is a pretty good glimpse into exactly the type of future that Republicans want for this country. So this is basically outlining exactly what the 2022 Republican Party of Texas believe their elected leaders within the state of Texas, but also at the federal level, assuming that they win in 2022 or 2024. So these are their top priorities. I'm just going to start off here with a pretty benign one just to set the standard here. They say at number 3 that they support the laws of nature and nature's God, and we support the strict adherence to the original language and intent of the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution of the United States and of Texas. So again, this one seems pretty benign, but I thought it was important to include it in this because so many things that we're about to get into right here are just brazenly unconstitutional. So it's amazing that they would put this as the first item on their list of priorities. But we move on down here to number 4. They say they support the sanctity of innocent human life created in the image of God. I wonder if, George W. Bush would have anything to say about the sanctity of innocent human life. Somebody who was responsible for hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of innocent people being slaughtered overseas with his illegal wars. Same with Donald Trump and his drone program. But they say that the Republican Party supports the sanctity of innocent human life created in the image of God, which should be equally protected from fertilization to natural death. So this is basically, again, just an anti-abortion talking point, and we're going to circle back around to more things pertinent to that specific issue. But we're going to move on here to number 8, where they say they support self-sufficient families founded on the traditional marriage of a natural man and a natural woman, whatever the fuck that means. But traditional marriage, famously not something that is written out in the Constitution. And in fact, under the current interpretation of the Constitution, according to the Supreme Court, and granted, this might be overturned given the reactionary makeup of our Supreme Court right now, but according to the current constitutional standard that we have in place right now here in the United States, gay people can also be a part of our marriage. So, the idea that it has to be between a natural man and a natural woman is unconstitutional according to the current interpretation. But they had, felt the need to include that in here, and they move on here to number 9, saying having an educated population with parents having the freedom of choice for the education of their children. So again, that one might seem somewhat benign, but we're going to circle back around to exactly what they mean by that. But now we're going to move on to number 19 down here in regards to the U.S. Constitution. They're proposing amendments to the U.S. Constitution. They say they want to support term limits of 12 years for federal and state offices. Okay, that seems fine, honestly, but they move on here to say that they oppose packing or enlarging the United States Supreme Court and supports the pending Keep 9 amendment as filed in the United States Senate and the House of Representatives with bipartisan support. So just keep in mind this idea of packing the courts. It's not something radical. It's not something new. The Supreme Court has changed sizes 6 times throughout the history of the United States. So the idea that the number 9 is something sacred or outlined within the constitutional text and that this is them doing an originalist interpretation, it's just complete nonsense. There's absolutely nothing special about the number 9 in terms of the Supreme Court. But they continue saying that they support the repeal of the 16th Amendment, federal income taxes. They support the repealing of federal income taxes. Okay. They continue saying they support restoring state sovereignty with the repeal of the 17th Amendment as well of the United States Constitution and the appointment of United States senators by the state legislatures. So you understand exactly what they mean by that. They're saying they no longer want to have the people of Texas directly elect their Senate representation. They want to have heavily gerrymandered districts, which are always going to favor Republicans in these instances. They're going to gerrymander the shit out of every single district within Texas, even beyond what they already are right now. And then they're going to have those state legislature positions elect the senators on behalf of the people of Texas instead of them getting to directly vote on this. So just brazenly undemocratic. And honestly, if you had that implemented, I don't even think that you could pretend that there was any semblance of democracy within Texas. But they continue saying they support a change to the 14th Amendment to eliminate birth tourism or anchor babies by granting citizenship to only to those with at least one biological parent who is a U.S. citizen. So basically saying if your parents immigrants happen to be immigrants from a country like Mexico, for example, just as one random example, we have a lot of immigrants here coming from Mexico. But even if they are legal American citizens in this country, or even if they are undocumented American citizens, they're basically saying that even if you have a kid who was born here in the United States, born on U.S. soil, they grew up their entire life here, and they get to the age of whatever it may be, 20 something years old, then the ICE or Customs and Border Patrol could basically come in and deport them to Mexico, even though they never set foot in Mexico in their entire life. So completely fucking insane on that front. They continue saying they support a constitutional amendment making English the official language of the United States and one of no more than 2 official languages of all U.S. territories and other possessions. So trying to force English as the inherent language of the United States. We have, thousands and thousands of people who speak, dozens and dozens of different languages around this country. What the fuck is the reason for making English the official language of the United States? And then, oh, by the way, on top of that, restricting it to 2 official languages. I'm guessing Spanish is the other one that they would include, but again, just completely arbitrary standards they're trying to force here. But they continue with executive orders, saying we oppose all executive orders, whether by a president, a governor, or a local official, that go beyond administration of executive authority, whatever that means. I'm sure that it's entirely arbitrary, and they'll just pick and choose which executive orders they don't want to abide by and have the effect of legislation. So there you go, a little bit more clarification there. Whatever Texas officials decide is legislation instead of interpretations of the Constitution. The line there is obviously extremely blurred, but they're basically just saying they don't want to abide by any executive orders that are laid out by the president or by anybody else if they don't want to abide by those. So completely ridiculous. They call on local lawmakers to nullify those executive orders. We move on here to number 21 on limiting overreach to limiting overreaching state government. They say we recognize the sovereignty of the state and its citizenry has been imperiled and threatened by the ongoing overreach of state elected officials and agencies. We therefore call for the enforcement of Article 2 of the Texas Constitution and restoration of our liberty by the following. They say A, repeal and replace Texas Code 418. B, no form of government shall ever again implement mass lockdowns on people, our businesses, and our churches. So just against doing any sort of lockdowns. Listen, nobody really liked the lockdowns, but if it comes to a pandemic, assuming that, COVID is not going to be the last pandemic, and it's still ongoing right now, but assuming that there's going to be future pandemics we have to deal with as well, seems like outright banning lockdowns is something that could be pretty dangerous as a precedent to set. But they continue saying that they oppose funding or implementation of any form of contact tracing. They oppose any form of contact tracing. Just like literally the bare minimum that the United States has already not been consistently doing, like other countries around the world have been doing. But opposing any form of contact tracing, that's just like, hey, let's keep track of who has a deadly disease right now. I mean, that's literally all that is. They're somehow opposed to that. They say the state constitution must be changed to require the legislature to come to session after a declared emergency lasting 30 days or more in 5 or more counties. They say the Texas governor shall no longer use executive orders to create public policy or law and shall no longer have the power to close businesses or declare some as essential or non-essential. And they also say the governor's authority during an emergency shall not be delegated. Then we move on down here to protecting constitutional rights regarding age. They say there should be a single age of majority upon which, when reached, all citizens will be granted their rights, duties, and privileges. I think that there could be some debate on this, but I think that it's kind of bizarre that you would imply that there should be some uniform age where everybody is granted the right to do everything. I mean, obviously, if you're talking about like something like voting, I mean, I could definitely see an argument that 16 or 17-year-olds could have valid political opinions that they should deserve the right to vote on, whereas I would not see that applying to something like, legalizing alcohol for 16-year-olds because, yeah, of course, 16-year-olds drink on a regular basis. That's, pretty much taken as a given. But in terms of legalizing it, you wouldn't do that because you understand the brain chemistry of young people and teenagers and how that could have detrimental effects in the long run. So I don't really believe in a universal age where everything should apply under the same banner. These are all arbitrary standards that we could, apply in different ways. But they continue here saying on number 28, for the census, this one is pretty important. They say, in accordance with the United States Constitution, we support an actual count of only United States citizens, and we oppose the Census Bureau estimates and the collection of all other data. So part of the reason they're going to circle back around to this with another one that we're going to talk about later down this list, and this is a long-ass list that we are going through here, but basically what this is going to have the effect of is that if you're not counting undocumented immigrants, then basically you're going to get a lower body count overall, and then you're going to get less federal grants and federal funding for maintaining your social programs And so really this is just a workaround way to slash welfare spending and to slash any government programs that would benefit average people, but very clear exactly what their intent is on something like that. They continue with the Equal Rights Amendment, saying that we call upon the 88th Texas legislature to adopt a resolution clarifying that the 1972 ratification by the 62nd Texas legislature of the proposed Equal Rights Amendment to the U.S. Constitution was valid only through March 22nd, 1979. So they're coming out openly against the Equal Rights Amendment, which was supposed to close the gap in treatment in various different ways between men and women in this country. So coming out opposed to equal rights in this country, just absolutely amazing. They continue here with parental rights, saying the rights of parents are foundational to Western society. Notice the word choice there, not American society, but Western society, and shall be respected, affirmed, and protected by the Texas Constitution and Texas law. They say we call upon the legislature to properly recognize and affirm the fundamental right of parents to make all decisions regarding the upbringing and control of their children in all aspects, especially with regard to grievous violations of the Texas education system. So basically they want to empower parents to completely disable the ability for public schools to teach their kids anything that any delusional, right-wing, reactionary, religious parent might not like. But they say any failure to recognize, protect, or honor these fundamental rights shall be actionable. No parent exercising any of these fundamental rights shall be prosecuted as a domestic terrorist. Kind of an interesting detail to put there at the end. It's almost as if they're kind of anticipating that there could be some action surrounding domestic terrorism with parents and as we've seen with Proud Boys going to a lot of these school board meetings explicitly to try to intimidate the school board and other parents that are there. But kind of interesting that they would say you can't be prosecuted as domestic terrorists. What? But they continue here saying prayer, Bible, and the Ten Commandments in school. We support prayer, the Bible, and the Ten Commandments being returned to our schools, courthouses, and other government buildings. Okay, so again, circling back to the first thing that they put at the top of this list in terms of supporting an originalist interpretation of the Constitution, this is brazenly unconstitutional. We have separation of church and state in this country. You can't just apply a specific religion, in this case, Christianity, the Bible, and the Ten Commandments being returned to schools, courthouses, and government buildings. It's brazenly unconstitutional, but they continue with another one down here saying the right to keep and bear arms. State and federal legislatures shall repeal, nullify the National Firearms Act of 1934 and the Gun Control Act of 1968. And they go on here. I mean, this is no surprise on the, aspects of gun control. They just want absolutely no regulations put in place whatsoever on that. They continue down here with state sovereignty, saying pursuant to Article 1, Section 1 of the Texas Constitution, the federal government has impaired our right to local self-government. Therefore, federally mandated legislation that infringes upon the 10th Amendment rights of Texas should be ignored, opposed, refused, and nullified. Texas retains the right to secede from the United States. Very constitutional of you there. Retains the right to secede from the United States, and the Texas legislature should be called upon to pass a referendum consistent thereto. So they want to secede from the United States. They want to have a vote on that. Okay, completely ridiculous. Wouldn't even reasonably happen, but interesting that they decided to put that in there after claiming that they were, the biggest defenders of the Constitution, while you actively want to secede from the country by which the Constitution is the founding document of. Okay, kind of interesting, but they continue here on number 36, saying equal protection for the preborn. We urge lawmakers to enact legislation to abolish abortion by immediately securing the right to life and equal protection of the laws to all preborn children from the moment of fertilization. Okay, so not even doing like a 6-week ban, not even doing a 15-week ban or a 12-week ban, full on since the moment of fertilization. They're going to be abolishing abortion because abortion violates the U.S. Constitution by denying such persons the equal protection of the law. They are not persons, they are fetuses and are not included as persons under the law. But they continue here with more. Number 38, they say utilities. This is absolutely fucking hilarious. We encourage free market solutions for providing utilities whenever possible. And they even get specific with it here on the Texas power grid, saying we urge the Texas legislature to pass legislation to harden the Texas electric grid, etc. Okay, we encourage free market solutions for providing utilities whenever possible. So not treating things like water and electricity and things like that as public utilities, but treating them as private goods to be traded as commodities. So having private corporations step in and price gouge your people for basic life necessities and extracting profit from that. That's the situation that we want. And we know exactly how well having this independent, privatized, power grid has gone for Texas recently. I mean, literally having mass outages as a result of this privatization and the so-called free market solutions really just means giving over like monopoly control to a handful of corporations, or again, going to price gouge your people for a significantly worsened quality of a service there. But they continue down here with number 40. This one's, again, absolutely insane, with a carbon tax, saying we oppose all efforts to classify carbon dioxide as a pollutant. They oppose all efforts to classify carbon dioxide as a pollutant, like the CO2, the thing that has been single-handedly driving inflation. I mean, not single-handedly, but disproportionately driving the pollution and the climate change that we have been experiencing here for literally decades in the world right now. I mean, just completely fucking ridiculous. This is just completely anti-science, top to bottom here. But they continue with number 42, saying, again, on the environment, we oppose environmentalism, whatever that means, I guess taking care of the environment or pushing back against climate change. They say we oppose environmentalism that obstructs legitimate business interests, so they're willing to sacrifice the planet on behalf of the capitalist class, and private property use, including the regulatory taking of property by government agencies. We oppose the abuse of the Endangered Species Act, to confiscate and limit the use of personal property and to infringe on a property owner's livelihood. We support the defunding of climate justice initiatives, the abolition of the Environmental Protection Agency, abolish the EPA, and repeal of the Endangered Species Act. And we oppose the America the Beautiful initiative, really just coming out full-on demon mode here, also known as the 30 by 30 program. They continue down here, number 46. On energy production, we support free market solutions and immediate removal of government barriers and direct subsidies to the production, transportation, reformation, refining, and distribution of energy. Again, pushing this further privatization of public utilities, or things that should be treated as public utilities. They say we oppose federally directed plans and proposals that favor renewable energy sources that may constitute a nuisance. So they're talking basically about like solar and wind power, or otherwise have substantially negative impact on neighboring landowners, including harming property values of our neighborhoods, farms, and ranch areas. So again, coming out against any action on renewable energy. We already heavily subsidize fossil fuels in this country. They're saying they don't want to subsidize any renewable energy programs, but they continue here down at number 48. Municipal Preemption. They say we encourage the legislature to preempt local government efforts to interfere with the state's sovereignty over business, employees, and property rights. This includes, but is not limited to, burdensome regulations on short-term rentals, bags, sick leave, trees, and employee criminal screening. We support the preemption of city ordinances that dictate sick leave policies to private businesses. So they want to eviscerate any guarantees of sick leave. Okay, so in other words, they want to make it so that you could get fired from your job because you happen to get sick. Okay, completely demented, absolutely fucking insane agenda that they're pushing here. But they continue down here with even better stuff. 51, reduce business regulations. We believe that the following businesses should be minimally regulated at all levels. And in terms of federal laws, they want to repeal minimum wage laws. Repeal Dodd-Frank, the regulation of Wall Street that was put in place, and it wasn't even going nearly far enough, but the measly regulation that was put in place after the Wall Street crash that caused the 2008 Great Recession. They want to repeal Dodd-Frank. They want to do all of these other different things. Some of these I think are less important than other ones, but some of the biggest ones that just stood out there are the repeal of the fucking minimum wage laws and repeal of Dodd-Frank, as well as the repeal of mandatory sick and family leave. But they continue with trade agreements. This time they say, we support free trade as a necessary component of American capitalism and of the United States' influence in the world, but all trade agreements between federal government and other nations should strictly adhere to the U.S. Constitution. So basically they're saying they support things like NAFTA, shipping, domestic manufacturing jobs overseas to exploit cheap labor at the expense of the American people and the American working class. They continue. God, it's even going to get worse from here. They say, government accountability here. We call on the Texas legislature to eliminate all special collective bargaining statutes for public employees and to hold all public servants accountable. Okay, they want to eliminate all special collective bargaining statutes. So in other words, they want to make it impossible for people who work for the government to be able to engage in union activities or to collectively demand basic, wages and working conditions, etc. Again, absolute demon shit. Number 62. On unions, they say we support legislation requiring labor unions to obtain consent of the union member before that member's dues can be used for political purposes. We oppose card check, and Texas should prohibit government entities from collecting dues for labor unions through deductions from employee paychecks. And we also encourage the adoption of the National Right to Work Act. So all of this is just anti-union bullshit, especially the National Right to Work Act, which really just translates into the right to work for less, because union workplaces on average make significantly more than non-union workplaces. They have better benefits, better job security, etc. And so basically what implementing this type of law would do would make it so that any individual worker who works even within a workplace that is unionized doesn't have to pay their union dues, and so completely undercuts the entire point of having a union, which is collective solidarity. But they continue with even worse shit down here. Number 66, high-speed rail. This one is just one that I don't even understand at any capacity. They say high-speed rail. Taxpayer money should not fund or subsidize high-speed rail, nor should eminent domain be used in construction of high-speed. How are you going to come out against trains? Like, how the fuck do you even think to include this in something? I mean, obviously this plays into like the car industry and things like that, and trying to keep people dependent on cars instead of public goods and public services and stuff like that. But I mean, goddamn, high-speed rail. How the fuck are you going to come out against high-speed trains? That's something that like universally everybody would love to see in this country. But they continue down here. 71, regulating the internet. They of course oppose efforts to implement net neutrality. So they want to make it so that internet service providers can throttle your internet service arbitrarily based on whatever suits them and their shareholders and their executives. Again, completely insane. They continue. Number 75. Down here on government spending and taxation, they say, we, the Republican Party of Texas, believe in the principles of constitutionally limited government based on federalist principles. To this end, we encourage our elected officials at all levels of government to work to reverse the current trend of expanding government and the growing tax and debt burdens placed on we, the people. Government spending is out of control at the federal, state, and local level. So basically what this is trying to do is impose an austerity on working people under the guise of like fiscal responsibility, typical Republican conservative bullshit. They continue with state fiscal restraint. Again, the same idea, saying they want to amend the Texas Constitution and state statute with a stricter spending limitation based on U.S. Census population. Interesting. So they want to make the census so that they're only counting documented U.S. citizens, not counting undocumented citizens, which means they're going to be getting less federal funding. And then they're also using this to say we are going to tie our funding programs for things like social welfare programs, etc., directly to the U.S. Census data, which they are actively trying to undermine. So again, just a plot here to undermine social spending programs top to bottom, basically. But they continue. Federal taxes. We support a flat tax, of course, or the replacement of the income tax with a consumption tax that reduces the overall tax burden. So flat tax, absolute fucking nonsense. Somebody who's making 20 grand a year should not have to pay the same amount of their income as somebody who's making millions of dollars a year. Completely ridiculous. Obviously, that is going to put more of a burden on that working class person than it would on millionaires and billionaires, but nonetheless, that's what they say that they support. Number 87, they say, defund big government, not the police. Any large city or county that cuts its police budget by more than 10% should be required to cut its property tax revenue by the same or greater percentage. What the fuck does that even mean? What do property taxes have to do with defunding the police? Just absolutely wild. I mean, again, this is like this circular nature of trying to enforce austerity every single way that they possibly can. So they're saying if you wanted to defund the police by, let's say, 10%, then you also have to defund your property tax revenue that you are bringing in, which means in turn that you're going to get less funding for things like public schools. So again, part of this imposing austerity to undercut any government programs and institutions that we have left in this country. But finally, we're starting to get to the end here. 105. They say on sexual education, this is where it gets really good. Okay, they say, we demand the state legislature pass a law prohibiting the teaching of sex education, sexual health, or sexual choice or identity in any public school in any grade whatsoever, or disseminating or permitting the decimation by any party of any material regarding the same. All school districts, individual schools, or charter schools are prohibited from contracting or making any payment to a third party for material concerning the above topics, and until the prohibition goes into effect, sexual education shall only utilize sexual risk avoidance programs, so abstinence-only sex education, complete fucking failure that only leads to people, having higher risks of STDs, higher risks of unintended pregnancy, pregnancies, etc. But that's what they want to enforce, just abstinence-only sex education. Insanity. It's like we're going back 100 years. Programs and promote abstinence outside of marriage. And before a student may be provided with human sexuality or family planning instruction, the district must obtain a written consent from the student's parent or guardian. Again, fucking absolutely wild. They continue down here with inappropriate and or harmful content, saying we request that the Texas legislature pass legislation that requires Texas schools and libraries to filter inappropriate and or harmful content such as pornography for minors. And of course, they don't just mean inappropriate or harmful content. What they mean is inappropriate or harmful content from the position of the most reactionary religious conservative you could possibly imagine. They say operators of adult sex entertainment businesses and venues, adult entertainment of any kind, including, interesting that they included this very specific one, drag queen story hour, shall not be a part of educational programming in public schools, libraries, or any other taxpayer funded program. So you have a problem with drag queen story hour, but you don't have a problem with enforcing mandatory abstinence-only sexual education on the entire state. You don't have a problem with giving taxpayer funds to enforce a religious agenda on the people of Texas. Completely hypocritical in this circumstance, but obviously this is just a continued attack against the LGBTQ community, but that's no surprises coming from the Republican Party. They continue down here, 107, healthcare in public schools. Legislatures shall prohibit reproductive healthcare services, including counseling, referrals, and distribution of condoms and contraception through public schools. We support the parents' right to choose without penalty, which medications are administered to their minor children. Again, anti-trans shit here. We support informed consent of parents before any school-based mental health assessments or interventions are performed. So, I mean, goddamn, if you're a kid and you have mental health problems going on and you don't necessarily feel comfortable bringing that up with your parents, you will not be able to get mental health care from the school without getting parental consent. Absolutely fucking insane. And they're also saying they want to entirely prohibit reproductive healthcare services, including counseling, referrals, and distribution of condoms. Okay, again, things that are only going to make this worse in terms of STDs and unintended pregnancies, the exact opposite of what they probably think that their intention is here. But they continue here, and I promise we're getting to the end. They say, religious freedom in public schools. We urge school administrators and officials not to infringe on Texas school students and staff's right to pray and engage in religious speech individually or in groups on school property without government interference. We urge the legislature to end the censorship and discussion of religion in our founding documents and encourage discussion of those documents, including the Bible, as their basis. Students have the right to exhibit religious items on school property. So they're saying we urge the legislature to end the censorship of discussion in religion in our founding documents and encourage discussing those documents. So they're basically saying teach the Constitution as an outreach or as an outgrowth of the Bible, basically. So again, completely dismantling any semblance of separation of church and state that is outlined by the Constitution. But finally, we're going to finish off here with just even better stuff. They say American identity. We favor strengthening our common American identity, which includes the contribution and assimilation of diverse racial and ethnic groups, but we reject critical race theory as a post-Marxist ideology. I would love to hear them give an actual definition of what the fuck they think that means. Post-Marxist ideology that seeks to undermine the system of law and order itself and to reduce individuals to their group identity alone. We support legislation to remove this ideology from government programs, including education involving race, discrimination, and racial awareness. So when they say this, what they're basically saying is that in any context within school that you are going to be discussing the racial history of the United States, you cannot teach it from the perspective of analyzing how racism has played a fundamental role in the institutions within the United States throughout history. That's what they're saying. They're saying if you're going to talk about race, you basically have to just bring up that one MLK quote where he says, I, dream of a day where, whatever the fuck the quote is that conservatives like to bring up all the time. Basically just want to teach as if racial history within the United States stopped with Martin Luther King and with Barack Obama becoming the president, and that we no longer have to even think about any of the existing racism that is baked within our institutions at a fundamental level and has obviously been implemented throughout U.S. history. But that's basically what they mean by that. They continue saying to facilitate the appreciation of our American identity, the contrast between freedom and the tyrannical history of socialism and communism, so anti-communist bullshit here, throughout history must be taught. So teaching that capitalism has never done any wrong and that socialism and communism are inherently evil totalitarian ideologies. They continue saying students shall pledge allegiance to the United States. Definitely not a cult here. Definitely not a cult. And Texas flags daily to instill patriotism. Students have the right to display patriotic items on school property, and schools should have the options to display the national motto, "In God We Trust." So continuing with that same exact idea. 112, scientific theories. They say we support objective teaching of scientific theories. Interesting. So what do you mean by objective? They say, such as life origins and climate change. These shall be taught as challengeable scientific theories subject to change as new data is produced. Teachers and students shall discuss the strengths and weaknesses of these theories openly without fear of retribution and discrimination of any kind. Listen, you should of course question everything. You should question any, scientific idea, and of course science changes over time, but these two issues, such as life origins, talking about evolution, and climate change, those are as settled as it gets in terms of scientific theories, okay? Every single respected scientist on the planet agrees with the origin of species, the theory of evolution, and the understanding that climate change is caused by humans and is actively getting worse. But they basically want this to be a conversation where it's like, the religious claims of the earth being 6,000 years old, which is completely fucking insane and delusional, should be taught on equal footing with the idea of evolution and things like that. Same with the climate change. They want to pretend as if there are two equal sides to this debate, and that who knows, this could change over time, and maybe climate change and evolution are actually fake. So again, completely fucking deranged. Finally, they continue down here at 117, saying abolish the Department of Education. Okay, abolish the Department of Education. Since education is not an enumerated power of the federal government, we believe the DOE should be abolished, and transfer of its functions to any other federal agency should be prohibited. So again, just helping them assist in the process of pushing their nationalist indoctrination. We move on down here finally to 124. Saying enforcement of gender identity. They say the official position of Texas schools shall be that there are only two genders, biological male and biological female. We oppose transgender normalizing curriculum and pronoun use. They're coming out against like social phenomenons here. We hold that a biological man shall compete against other biological men, and biological women shall compete against other biological women in athletics in the public school system of Texas and at the collegiate level. Again, just transphobic bullshit. We don't need to run through all of the different arguments. I've talked about this extensively on this channel before, but just fucking deranged here. And I promise again, we got two more left. They say on 128, fund and support Western civilization instruction. Okay, so basically this is just a dog whistle for white supremacy, but fund and support Western civilization instruction and defund political correctness. They say, like Hillsdale College, we agree that state universities should value the merit of each unique individual rather than succumbing to the discriminatory trend of so-called social justice and multicultural diversity. Coming out against multicultural diversity, which judges individuals not as individuals but as a member of a group, which pits one against other competing groups in a divisive power struggle. They say we oppose any state formula, funding, or graduation requirements for divisive curricula inconsistent with the above, including Marxist, anti-American, critical race theory, multiculturalism, and diversity, equity, inclusion courses. So they're saying straight up that they would like to ban, as a part of the mandatory formula for graduation requirements within Texas, the teachings of Marxism, critical race theory, multiculturalism, and diversity, equity, inclusion. This is absolutely fucking wild. This is just straight up fascism. This is Christian nationalism, but they say they oppose using public funds for homosexuality, transgender, or other diversity, equity, inclusion centers. Public universities should be required to create a comprehensive program of instruction in Western civilization, American institutions, and free market liberty principles, with centers and funding dedicated to that task. Public universities should be required to comply with the above before tuition or state appropriations are increased. And finally, we have one more down here with 144 and 143, honestly, but these are just similar veins here. They say homosexuality is an abnormal lifestyle, and they also say we oppose all efforts to validate transgender identity, just really trying their best to increase the suicide rate within the trans community. And they say for the purpose of attempting to affirm a person age 21 or under if their perception is inconsistent with their biological sex. So listen, I'm just going to leave it at there. Again, this is probably the longest video I've ever published on this channel. We're at 32 minutes, roughly 33 minutes by this point, but I didn't even get to all of it. So this is, just a tiny fraction of the absolutely insane far-right, reactionary, fascist, Christian nationalist agenda that Republicans see as a future for this country. Understand that these might seem crazy and radical and, like this is just a fringe minority within the conservative movement here in the United States, but it's not. I mean, this is shit that is ratified by the Texas official GOP party, okay? This is their official position. This is becoming mainstream. Texas is the largest Republican state in the entire country, so, understand it's important to go through all of this and to see, exactly what their agenda is for the future of this country, because when they take power, this is not something that will be isolated to Texas. These are going to be the exact types of things that they are going to try to enforce at a federal level on all of the country. So, important to keep up with this, and goddamn, that was absolutely fucking batshit insane.